start right up here at the bow. We have our anchor. Pretty simple design. And just like on the ship, we have a brake. We have a dog to engage it. We have a riding pole. Same basic three functions. Those of you who have a Ranger book give you the idea of what we have for it. 400-pound anchor. Is that right, Alex?
Yes.
Right. 60 feet of chain. I think it says 45 in the book. 60, 45 is the same. 320 feet of wire. This is all electrically operated. Underneath here is an electric motor, gears. And I'm not going to go into the whole operation of it, but we have an electric-driven on this. That's all it is. We have a North Hill type anchor. We have 60 feet of chain, 300 feet of wire. We leave it here. We leave it on the brake, disengaged. The pole stays out just because the pole doesn't like to stay in. And we have a booty hook on it, a little pelican hook. That's how we leave it. So if you ever wanted to let it go, and you want to know, because some boats will leave theirs engaged because they're worried about the brake slipping, we leave it disengaged. So all we would have to do is release the pelican hook, release the brake, and the anchor should go. So those are the things you want to know. You know, is your anchor ready? Especially when we're here working the canal, if we ever have a problem, we got less than a minute to get that anchor ready in the water. You know, before, especially the current's ripping. And it's electric driven, so we can drop it anytime, but we're not going to heave it back in unless we have power. You know, we've actually had it stuck on the bottom a few times. We couldn't heave it back in, and we're out there banging on things trying to get it in. This boat has a lot of tanks. It's kind of like a tank farm in its own way. It was designed to be a standby boat for oil rigs. You know, if an intro oil rig ever had a fire or anything, it could go out and get lifeboats and bring them in. It used to have a fire monitor on the back. And they can provide water and fuel. So we have a lot of tanks on board. We have 24 tanks. So you'll see here we have vents. Green blue is for bottled water. Green is for ballast. Yellow is for fuel. Those are all pretty standard colors. But different companies, different boats will have different color schemes. Some of them we might work on something that has 10, 20 different colors. They'll be two-toned. But here we're just simple. Green, blue, yellow. Keep walking around the deck. If you guys take a look at the fire station over here, we have 2 fire stations on the main deck. Most fire stations you'll find are pretty common. You'll end up with 50 feet of hose, an 1.5-inch nozzle, and a spanner wrench. That's what we have at both of these. Down in the engine room, there's 75 feet of hose. The only reason it's a little bit longer is because it has to be able to reach all the way into the forward hold. 1.5 inch, yep. These also run off of 2 electric motors. So if we don't have electricity, we don't have fire pumps. So our generators are pretty key, and we'll see that on the engine room side of things. Louvers, another fire safety item. If you have an engine room fire, this is pretty top on the list. You know, securing fuel, securing air. All you do is close them, open them. There's fans inside here that pull air in from the outside, and then what we'll see when we go up top is on the stacks, we have 2 louvers on the back, and the air just naturally comes out of those. There's fans in here that suck it into the engine room, and it just naturally flows up the stacks and out. The fire axe right here, we have 2 fire axes, one inside, one outside. Emergency fuel shutoff right here. There are two emergency fuel shutoffs, one on the other side. I'll talk about it more when we get back there so you can all hear me. Now this is a stupid question, but what do you guys think that emergency fuel shutoff does?
Shuts off the fuel.
To what?
To the engines. To the tanks.
Technically to the tanks. So we have 2 day tanks. They're cross-connected. If I shut the fuel off on one side, all I've done is shut that tank off from feeding. I'm still getting plenty of fuel from the other side. So if I want to secure fuel, you got to shut them both off. And that's one of the things you want to know. Some boats will just have 1 center tank, maybe 1 fuel shut off. We have 2, and there's basically a pipeline from one tank to the other that our 2 main engines and our 2 generators feed off of.
It's the cross-connect valve?
Yep, and there's no separate valves to cross-connect them. It's just those emergency fuel shut-offs. So if I wanted to run off fuel from one side for whatever reason, let's say we had a problem in the tank, I close that same valve. That's why you'll see we have piping diagrams. I'll show you guys some of them when we get in there, just real quick of all the fuel system. But that's something you want to know. What does this do? And again, it sounds simple, But I tell you, I've spent more time with my head under those deck plates than probably anywhere else, because every pipe down there is painted the same color. And you know, somebody thought it worked this way because he heard it from so-and-so. By the time I got on here, you know, there had been 10 previous captains and you know, a whole bunch of previous engineers, and it's like a game of telephone. And at some point, I just said, I just got to stick my head under the deck plates and look around for myself. Open valves, see what things happen. So you want to know what those things are. Let's see what else we have back here. We'll take a walk back up here. We have our lazarette here. We'll switch gears from safety into propulsion. We're not gonna go down there, because for us to get 20 people down out of that would take an hour in itself. We have 2 rudders, and I'll talk more about the steering system when we get down below. But 2 rudders, they're kept in sync by a big jockey bar that goes from one to the other, basically a big steel bar, so they can't work independently. They'll always be. If that one's 15 degrees, this one's 15 degrees, and so on. So I'll talk about that a little bit more when we're down below and we can see the steering pumps. All right, let's keep working our way around. This is not a rescue boat, by the way. The Coast Guard called it a rescue boat, and I said, no way. You think we're going to be able to rescue anybody with this thing? It's got a hole in the side of it. So I had them take it off our list. It's a little utility boat that we keep. So, yeah. But the Coast Guard said they put it down as a piece of required equipment. I said, we're not required to have it. So technically, I couldn't take it off the boat to repair it and get underway without it on the boat. So those are the little technical things.
Moran thought it was one of those fast, rapid release lifeboats.
I've never worked for a company that's had a rescue boat that's ever used it to rescue somebody. It's usually used to go ferry groceries or go for a little nice Sunday stroll at anchor. Yeah, we're going to test the lifeboat today, Cap. All right. Anyway, just so you guys know, that's not really a rescue boat. It's emergency escape from the workshop. I'll show you guys when we're down there. Very important, keep clear. This is not really the most clear setup here, but I clean up Jimmy's stuff every single time, and I've been told I'll have to do it forever, so I just leave it.
It's very common in the industry, you know what I mean? Because everybody gets doing the job. I'm always out here. If I want to lash my fenders to this, it's easier than carrying it from over there. Then you come out as you're the mate, you're the safety guy, and you're like, what the fuck?
Especially on limited tonnage, where you have a smaller working area than you might have on a ship. Very common.
Oh, did you guys just record that? What the fuck?
Yeah, 2 shut-offs there. I got them labeled. Paint's starting to come off of this one. I got to leave them in. Fuel oil transfer pump. When we're transferring fuel, we usually try to have somebody out here. So if I see a gooseneck overflowing or a leak, I can shut the pump off right from here. Then emergency ventilation. Again, if we have a fire on board, we don't want to have to go down below to shut the vents off. We don't have to. We can shut them off right from here. You can actually hear the controller clicking. I don't think this one's right. You can't turn the fuel on from here for good reason.
It's all electric anyway. Just power.
Another thing, guys, I didn't really mention because it's kind of simple, but you know, the deck gear, deck tackle we have, the bits, the cleats, the mooring lines. You know, make sure you guys observe all that. The fuel fill, that's actually a fuel fill containment. You'll notice the pipe doesn't reach the bucket. That wouldn't fly nowadays, but we're grandfathered in. If we take the connection off, the valve off, because the kids get the line stuck into the valve all the time, we break the valve corrodes. So we only get fuel twice a year, so we take it off. But that's fuel fill containment. Nowadays you'll see boats where every gooseneck has its own containment. If we were built before that, we didn't have to have them. By gooseneck, I don't know if you guys know, that's what I mean by the vent there. We call them goosenecks. There's a little ball inside there, so if we were to sink, the ball would float up and seal that pipe so fuel wouldn't leak out. So those are all vents, and when we're filling them, you can actually put your hand under there and feel the air come out. And that's a good way to test that you got product going into the right tank. We got 2 life rings with strobes. It's a good habit just to test the strobes. You just flip them upside down, and they'll go off. We have 2 that have strobe lights on them with clips, so we can detach the strobe light if we want it during the day. One back here with the line on it. We got the 2 louvers for the back stacks. Right here, the louvers here. We have the covers back here. We just stow them right here. They're not hinged like the ones on the bow are. And this is our after steering console too. I'll talk a little bit more about that up in the wheelhouse. And if you guys want to keep moving along, we'll meet back up. All right, so this is the wheelhouse. Let me bring my list out to make sure I go over. I'm not selling this one. Firefighting equipment. So I'm going to just run through a few of the things. Firefighting equipment, we don't have a fixed system on board. All this manual extinguishers. I'm not going to go into the extinguishers and the uses and classifiers. You guys should know that. I know how to find it. All the fire extinguishers are on the fire plan. I'll point out some as we go around. It's very common in a wheelhouse. You'll see two different types. You'll see a small ABC dry chem. And you'll see a CO2 for the electronics. That's very common in almost every wheelhouse. You'll see that kind of combination. Life rafts. We have two life rafts back here, number 1 and number 2. They're labeled on the fire plan. One's an 8-man, one's a 16-man for a total of 24. We don't have an EPIRB. We talked about life rings. We don't keep survival suits on board normally because same reason we don't have an EPIRB. We are staying inland waters only, 3 miles from shore, so we don't need those. Life jackets. The number on the fire plan is right. If you guys have a Ranger book, whatever crazy numbers they put in there, not right. Number on the fire plan is right. It's always a test question in Ranger, how many life jackets we have on board. It drives me nuts because I could take half of them off and we could still be compliant and their number would be wrong. The COI, Certificate of Inspection, will always say how many you're required to have. In our case, it's 24 because we can only carry 24 people. We have 56 on board. We used to be able to carry 56. So we just kept the life jackets on board. But the number that you have on board, with any safety equipment, if you have it on board, it has to work, it has to be current. So you'll see them. There's 28 back here in 2 separate piles. One's 20, one's 28, and then there's 8 in the galley. Can you, in the nav lab there, there's a yellow container right back there to your right. You can grab that. Engines, we'll talk about that down there. Steering, we'll talk about that down there. Yep, you can bring that up here. Flares. I always get in the habit of writing the dates right on the bottom of them so I can just see from looking in here if any of them are expired. Different boats will have different requirements for flares. I'm going to say 2 different kinds here. 2 different kinds. Do you guys know what they are?
Orange smoke is for the day.
Yeah, this is an orange smoke signal. What's this one?
Parachute.
What is it?
Handheld.
Oh.
This is just a regular flare. It's not a parachute. I don't think it is.
Good job,
No,
Dixon.
just a handheld. You might have parachute flares, you might have canned smoke. So you just want to take a look at them, what they are. A lot of boats, will take their expired ones and test with them. Do drills with them. Do they do pyrotechnics on Tuesday? When the Coast Guard came down here? A little bit, yeah. We had double trips on Tuesday, so I didn't get to see that. Auxiliary systems, we'll go over that down there. Fuel, we'll go over down there. Orientation. Internal communication equipment. We have sound-powered phones. A little archaic, but simple system. We have one here, one in the galley, one in the engine room. You'll almost always see something built into the wheelhouse, into the engine room, because those are your 2 control places. Sometimes built into the lazarette or, an auxiliary machinery steering room. We have a loud hailer right here. 2 VHF radios. We just have VHF radios. We don't have any medium frequency radios. Do you guys know why?
Because we're not going that far.
We're not going that far, right? It's very common, and I might go a little bit too much into it. One of them is always supposed to be on an emergency battery bank. We actually don't have a battery bank on board. It's weird. This is the first boat I've ever worked at. The electronics don't run off a battery. But the generator starts off a battery. So our radio is wired into a battery, and we have a little switch for emergency. So again, if we lost electricity, we still have batteries for the radio. So that's something you'll always find in every wheelhouse. You'll have a VHF radio on a backup battery system. Watertight integrity. Watertight integrity. You guys all know what deadlights are? So you have a porthole. You'll see them down if you look down the galley or the head or the bunk room. It's just a metal cover that goes over that porthole. Vent covers, scuttles, hatches, watertight doors. You guys can see what we have for watertight doors, scuttles, escape trunks, stuff like that. Our general alarm. We can test our general alarm real quick. Oh, it doesn't work. Most of the time, your general alarm is one of those things that's going to be on all the time. And this one here, because it was added after the fact, it's on a breaker. Rings here, and down in the engine room, there's a light. There's a light and a and the ringer because you can't see them. These are called contactors, general alarm contactors. Then the bell and a strobe. You'll see the strobe down in the engine room. Let's see here. I gave you guys the list of the vessel particulars, so we don't have to talk about that. I think we're pretty good up here. Steering system is hydraulic, well, electro-hydraulic. So again, you need electricity to drive the hydraulic motors to turn the wheel. If you don't have electricity, like the system's off right now, you can turn the wheel. Sometimes it wants to turn, sometimes it won't turn at all, and you think you're gonna break this thing in half. I don't dare touch the spokes when I'm turning it by hand. See, it doesn't really wanna go that way. I worry I'm gonna break the wheel doing that. But you can, that's a backup steering method. If we lost electricity, I could still turn the wheel, and that's important to know. I was once running a high-speed ferry that goes about 36 knots and has autopilot. My first question, it was the first boat I ever worked with autopilot. It was great. I go, if I turn the wheel while I'm on autopilot, will it instantly give me command back? Because, oh, you don't need to know that. Don't worry about it. Just know you always have, just hit this button when you want steering. And you know, I was able to figure it out on my own pretty quick. I have to shut the autopilot off before the wheel will work. But you're out there in the summer on the 4th of July, somebody cuts in front of you, your first instinct most of the time is to go for the wheel or the throttles. But I had to know, you know, make sure I shut that autopilot off. I wanted to know how that system worked. And the other thing, like ships and stuff, this was not a ship, this was a little ferry, but big ships, IMO certified, you turn that wheel, the ship's going to turn. And that's good to know. Usually a whole bunch of alarms and stuff will go off with it. Throttles, we'll talk about this a little bit more down in the engine room too, but these are air actuated. There's no air in the system right now anyway, but we have two control stations here and the after station. They both run off of air and hydraulic throttles. If I want to change the throttles, I just push down on this little button here, and all it does is send an air command down to basically a switch down there, a shuttle valve they call it. It says put the air in this direction. If I push the button back there, it'll switch that shuttle valve to the other side, and the air will go to that station, and just immediately take it away from this. When you get into electronic throttles and stuff, you'll find that there's interlocks, you know. One system has to send it, the other system has to acknowledge it. Here, you just push that button, and the air will come right to the station here. And there usually is a delay. When we're neutral now, you put your engines clutch ahead. You haven't added any RPM, you're still at idle RPM. But now that the gears engage, the shaft's spinning. And then with this boat, and all boats, you'll have what's called the dead band, which is a section where nothing's gonna happen. And this boat is 10%. From clutch to 10 degrees forward, nothing's gonna happen. Then you start to speed up. And anybody who's touched these for the first time knows once you hit your throttle range, it's pretty quick. You go from 0 to nothing. And there's a fair amount of delay, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, but that's pretty standard. So that's it. Air throttles, hydraulic steering. We have 2 steering pumps. I'll show you guys that down below. This is how you turn them on. The alarm's going to go off because the steering pumps are off. So I just tried to turn steering on, so basically it's just a power loss alarm. But that's something you want to know. If I'm driving along and the generator dies, that alarm's going to go off. It's really annoying. That's something you want to know. Again, I can still steer by hand. These are old generators. It's not uncommon. It's not common, but they could shut off. One time they have, they'll just shut down. Or their frequency and voltage might get out of range and the alarms will start going off. And then we have 2 engine emergency shutdowns. There's just 2 toggle switches down here. All they do is just close the fuel to the engine. The second the fuel goes, the engine shuts off. And I'll show you guys that down there too. Once they're shut off down here, they got to be reset down there. But it's always good to know, how do I, shut down the engine in an emergency? A couple of years ago, a very crappy ferry boat put a gigantic hole in like a brand new yacht because they were backing out of Long Wharf in Boston and their engine got stuck in reverse and you didn't know what to do. You think that was a valid excuse to the Coast Guard? I didn't know what to do. And then they're like, oh, your shutdowns didn't work in the engine room. The captain got blamed for it. He knew they didn't work. He ran the boat with them not working. So that's about all I have up here. Let me grab this book here. I'll leave this out. You guys can look around. What I did on this boat is I just took all my notes that I made and put them in the book. Put them in a book. So anytime I need any bit of information, I basically have it in this binder. Some of the stuff's regulatory stuff. This book usually lives back there. So when you guys come on, maybe at the end we'll set up a time if you guys want to come back. Like, 2 days over the next 2 weeks or something, so we know you guys are on here. Because if we don't know you're on here, and I go to come lock the boat up, I'm not gonna look for a bunch of cadets in the engine room. I put on all 4 locks, I pull the ladder up, and I go home. And we'll find you in the morning starving. You know, all the tank capacities and things, and some of this is a little bit more than what you need for a basic familiarization, but you want to be able to instruct people on where to find this information. So I'll leave that back here on the chart table. Some of you guys can look at it. All right, let's head down to the galley. We'll point out a few things on the way down. One of them here is the station bill. This is just the standard station bill. When you guys run it for your classes, you fill out your own, but we're always required to have a station bill. So we have this made up, some regulatory stuff made up. The fire plan blown up here. There's one error on here. You guys get 10 points if you can find it.
Nobody get no 10 points.
First aid kit. Jimmy's mess. One thing I didn't point out there, so we have a first aid kit at the bottom of the stairwell there. We also have what we call a trauma kit up in the wheelhouse. So one thing I didn't point out, what we have in that one is like gauze, a large saline bottle, a tourniquet, a couple more of the quick things that you might need. Like, let's say somebody gets their fingers ripped off in the engine room, or caught in the anchor and your arm gets ripped off or something. The quick triage things are in that box, kind of like a grab and go kit, where like band-aids and I don't know, ear swabs and stuff are in this box down there. The less acute stuff. What was I gonna say? What kind of fire extinguisher is that right there? Oh boy, it's not gonna say it on it.
Dry chem.
You know how you can tell it's a dry chem without even looking at it?
Nozzle.
The nozzle and the gauge. CO2 doesn't have a gauge. So you know why? It's done by weight. On every CO2 canister, you'll find the exact weight of the bottle, because manufacturing errors, they stamp the exact weight on it, and then written on it you'll see the exact weight of the product. So the total weight when they weigh it should be the same. Should be those two numbers added up. And if you're 10% off, they'll make you recharge them. We have a Stokes slitter there. In the bunk room, we have a bunch of firefighting gear, and I'll let you guys look at that when we take one group down to the engine room. One group can stay up here and look. We have 2 full sets of turnout gear, 2 SCBAs, 2 spare bottles, 2 extra lengths of hoses, and on the back side of that door there's actually a list of all the safety equipment that's in there. It's just on the back side of that. So if you want, I'll take the first 10 of you. If you guys want, you can throw your life jackets down here on the settee. And underneath the settee, there's life jackets. There's another 8 under here. Probably says it on the side of the settee there. Another sound-powered phone. Emergency lights, and then the little yellow lights are lanterns. They just run off a 6-volt battery. You'll get in the habit of, if you're the safety officer, a safety person on a ship or a boat, you'll get in the habit of every time, maybe not every time, but when you walk by the emergency light, you'll just end up testing them. Let me see. Use a button on the bottom. They work. We have those little lanterns there, and every now and then, like when you guys are having class, I just kind of get bored and I just walk around and hit as many of them as I can, and I have them all on a list. I have every bit of safety information or safety equipment written on a list. So twice a semester, I print that list out and I just come and check. It's nice and simple. You guys walk by 3 bits of safety equipment before you step foot on that ladder. Do you guys know what they are?
Say that again.
You guys walk by 3 safety items before you step foot off that ladder. That's one of them. There's 2 more. Top of the ladder.
Flashlight. Yep.
Not that flashlight.
Oh, there's another extinguisher.
Another extinguisher. Alright, we just got one more.
Emergency light.
Emergency light. So you'll be surprised how often you guys will walk by this stuff and not even think about it exists. And that it's not a criticism of anybody, it's just a natural reaction. So down here, we have a lot of equipment in this boat. Your average, let's say a ferry boat of this size, is going to have half the stuff down here. But this boat is designed to work offshore, so it's built a little bit more rugged. We have our 2 generators. These are Detroit diesel 471s. That's the model number. 71 series is the engine style. They made them up to 12 cylinders deep. This one only has 4. And they made them as little as 2 cylinders. These engines will last forever. These are like the best engines that are ever come around. Our main engines are Cummins 855. That's the model number of them. The main engines are 350 horsepower each. And again, if you have the range manual, that particular sheet, that'll answer those questions there. We have a boiler, 2 air receivers. These are the receivers, these are the compressors. Most people just call them air compressors, but just so you know, this is actually, the tank is actually called a receiver. The operating pressure for this boat is 150 psi. So this thing will charge up to 150 psi and then shut itself off. The throttles work off of 60 pounds. So there's a pressure reducer over there on the bulkhead. I'm not gonna, you guys don't need to know like super deep into the air throttles, but you wanna know what your pressure should be for your air throttles. We were doing a trip one day and we were doing like man overboard drills or something, and we're getting ready to come out of the anchorage, and we're going to speed up, and throttles keep getting pushed forward, and we're not adding throttle. What happened was Jimmy was actually down here working on the air throttles, forgot to turn the air system, forgot to turn them back on, so we lost all of our air pressure. We were down to nothing. No air pressure, no throttles, no alarm on the system. It was just an honest oversight. It was a good thing it didn't happen in the canal. It happened out there, so basically we just sat out there for a few minutes, let these things build up. You know, we went up to like 80 pounds before we started moving, and we went about our day. But you can actually lose air pressure to the point where your engines will clutch out. When the solenoids lose pressure, they'll go back to neutral, and you're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. You basically have to have somebody come down here and put their hand on the gear and manually switch it. You can bypass them a little bit. There's a lot of stuff in this engine room. I'm going to try to not overwhelm you guys too much. But that's something to know. You know, 150 pounds. So anytime I come down the ladder, one of the first things I look at is that air gauge because I can see it. You know, because I usually can't hear what's going on, but I can see it. Our generators, most generators you'll see. In fact, I guarantee every generator you'll see in the real world usually runs at 1,800 RPM. Ours run at 1,200. It's just that the generator's wound for 1,200. It's an older system. It's good for the generators to run forever because these are designed to run for 1,800 RPM, which is basically the top end of the engine. But even when I got hired here, I automatically assumed 1,800 RPM because every 71 series generator I worked on was 1,800 RPM. These ones were 12. So those are just the little nuances to different boats. That white box over there is our steering system. So again, it's hydraulically operated. You need electricity for that to happen. We can run it on shore power. We just usually don't. What was I going to say? And the other thing, we have 2 types of power on this boat. I'm trying to not overcomplicate this too much. We have single phase power, which is what does the lights. Basically, it just does the lights. And then we have what we call 3-phase power, which is like the industrial side of things. All of our pumps and machinery usually run off a 3-phase. So when we start that boat, you know, when we start the hydraulic motors and stuff like that, we need all those circuits turned on. And I'll show you guys that as you walk around. We have a lot of valves. Not a single one of these used to be labeled. I went around and I tried to label the important ones. These are ballast valves here. We don't use the ballast system, so they're just closed. These blue ones here, or what do you guys think the blue ones are? Potable water. We don't use the potable water tanks, so we keep the valves closed. We actually have the pipeline disconnected. We have a break in there just to make sure water never gets back in there. And every year we open up all the tanks and look inside of them. We have lube oil there, a little hand pump when we need to fill the engines up. We have hydraulic oil on this side. We don't keep any hydraulic oil in there. There's a sewage tank underneath you guys there, and a slop oil tank just in front of it. The boat's got a lot of tanks on it. And then we have 8 fuel tanks, 6 storage tanks, and 2 day tanks. In the Ranger book, they're numbered 1 through 24. That's the worst goddamn system in the world. If somebody tells me, oh, I have a leak in tank 24, I don't know what tank 24 is. I just know it's near the stern because it's the last one. But if you say, oh, I have a leak in fuel tank 4 port, I know exactly which one that is. That's the 4th set, and there's only 4. It's on the port side. So I changed all the numbers around. So like our ballast tanks, we have 4 ballast tanks. Number 1's the 4-peak by itself. Number 2, port and starboard, 3 port and starboard, and 4 port and starboard are in the lazarette. We have 2 sets of potable water tanks. 1 port and starboard up forward, 2 port and starboard back aft. And that's basically it. But I thought that was a better system. That's how they do it in the real world for the most part. 1 through 24 is stupid. So that's that for tanks. But you'll see there's valves everywhere around here. You know, somebody looks at this valve here, they're gonna be like, "What is this?" I tried the best I could to get a label on there. It says aft, or it says engine room aft bilge suction. So if we had seawater in here, let's say the boat, a few years ago, the shaft actually disconnected from the engine, slid back, and water was flooding into the engine room, so they had to get all their pumps on. And we have a manifold up there that you guys will see, and it just says engine room. So somebody's gonna open that up thinking they're sucking out of the engine room, but what they don't know, to get this suction back here to work, there's a separate valve. So I label them. You'll see more of the labels when we go up forward. And even if the lazarette is flooding, I have there's another valve here for the lazarette. There's a valve on the manifold that says lazarette, so somebody's gonna open that and think that's all there is to it. For some reason, there's another valve back here. The one color we didn't talk about was black. Black is bilge suction. So all of our bilge suction piping is black. Let's take a walk around the engines. This generator here is air start. This generator over here is electric start, or battery start. So let's say we had no air pressure. The boat's been sitting for a while with no electricity or anything, and we have no electricity to charge the receivers back up, so we can start this off of our battery. Usually, we try not to lose air. Both of our compressors are still at 150 pounds. Hopefully we'll stay at 150 pounds tomorrow. We're always able to have enough air to start things right up in the morning. Both main engines are air start. The idea is even if you didn't have air, you can get a generator started, start your compressors, build up air, then you can start the engines. These are all the little air solenoids here. Can't really actuate them by hand. You can disconnect this pretty easily and move the gear back and forth. So you want to kind of know what this looks like, you know. Let's say that this actuator fails. Well, worst case scenario, I just come down here and put it manually ahead and just run with it like that. You want to know what your gauges are? What always gets me on these boats, they have an oil temperature gauge. Most boats don't. Anybody know what the average water temperature or marine diesel engine should be?
180.
180 on the spot. Oil temperature is usually about 220. So I come down here one day and I see 220 degrees and I'm freaking out. I'm checking the coolant level, I'm checking the gauge up in the wheelhouse. It was just me I just happened to look at the gauge wrong. I was looking at oil temp. Oil temp's about 220, 210. So that's just something you want to know, what your gauges are and what the ranges are. On the gauge cluster in the wheelhouse, the port and starboard oil pressure gauges are a different scale. One of them was replaced at one time with a different scale. So it always looks like one side's really low. It's just a different scale. And it throws everybody off. The starters for this are on the outboard side. They're both on the starboard side of the engine, basically. Fuel, we always keep the fuel shut off to the main engines at night. We don't do it with the generators. We're just worried with the type of fuel rack system on this boat that fuel can leak into the cylinders at night, so we just shut the fuel off. A new higher orientation, I don't think you're really gonna have to know how to start the boat, start the engine up. But you want to have an idea what the things are around the engine. You know, turbocharger, very hot. The engine just ran today, it's probably still hot enough to burn you. Anybody know what this thing is?
Something to do with the air.
Why do you think that?
Just looking at the air.
It's the air filter. Yep, that's all it is. Air comes into the turbo, and basically goes into the engine. From there. Then the exhaust gases come out. Spin the turbo a little bit more, and off the stack they go. What else can we show you guys on this? And you can't really see underneath the turbo there where it goes into the air manifold, but there's an oil filter here, your spin-on filters, we had coolant sitting on top of these filters for like 2 weeks because Jimmy didn't want to clean it up because coolant's actually splashed out of the top of the tank. You can feel how warm that is. There's a little vent on top. So coolant, we had rough weather, coolant splashed off. So I noticed the second I came down here, I said, we have coolant spilled. So Jimmy had coolant spilled. We just left it there. Normally you want to clean things up all the time. That way you can kind of keep an eye on what's leaking and not. You'll see these Murphy switches a lot. You always want to get in the habit of testing them every day. They should spring back like this. So if the water level in here dropped, it's going to hit that little contact. and it's going to send an alarm up. It's not going to shut the engine off, but it's going to send an alarm. You want to know what kind of automation your engine has, what kind of shutoffs it has. Now with the new diesel engines, they can take control right away from you. They can have a bad sensor reading, they don't like what's going on, they'll derate, they'll shut off. You want to know what those are. These are easy, they're old, they don't have any of that complicated stuff. Those are the things that you want to keep your eye out for when you go on new boats. We have a waste oil pump to suck the oil out of the engine room. We can suck the oil straight out of the engine, put it into the slop tank, and then whenever we're ready, pump it from the slop tank to the main deck with that pumped air. Fuel tank 3 starboard. We'll keep walking around here. We have our fire pumps. These are fire, bilge, and ballast. That's why you'll see a couple different colors in the system here. So I can suck water. I can suck seawater from the sea chest. I can suck water from ballast tanks, or I can suck from the bilges. I can pump water to the fire stations up on deck, to any ballast tank I want, or overboard. So technically I could take bilge water, pump it overboard. I could take bilge water and pump it out of a fire hose. This one system, and these are pretty common, they can do all the 3 different things. Instead of having 3 complete different systems with piping in them.
Do you have to like manually like line it up?
Yep.
To where you want to go?
So we have a sea chest valve here, sea suction. There's only one sea chest on the boat, another thing that's good to know. And I got all the valves labeled. And again, you'll have to know how the system works, otherwise the labels mean nothing. But sea chest is there. And then this one will say bilge suction port pump. So this one only sucks from this manifold. It's not going to suck from the sea chest. This one here says port pump sea suction. So this one here will suck from the sea chest. And then this one will say port pump ballast suction or fill. If I'm either sucking from a ballast tank or filling a ballast tank. Most of the time, what we do with this system is we use it to run the fire pumps. So I would do sea chest, I would do port, pump, sea suction. That's going to bring water up to the strainer, from the strainer into the pump, from the pump. Then from the pump I can direct it to wherever I want. If I could open this valve here and send it back down here into a ballast tank, or I could send it up these 2 here. Red is to the fire main, green is for the overboard discharge on the ballast system. Any of you guys know what to check when you start a ballast pump up? What's the easiest way to know it's working? Put your hand on it, the pipes will get cold. How long have we been down here?
Do you like prime it or do you kind of just open it right up? So I worked on a boat where we would like kind of like open it halfway to get like a positive suction, and then like once we got that going, then we just open it right up.
You can start this against the closed discharge, and it's not going to hurt it. These pumps are so strong and powerful, and the water level is somewhere around here anyway, so they're going to kind of self-prime. All bilge ballast fire pumps have to be self-priming by regulation.
Okay.
So they're supposed to be self-priming. So, how's your phone doing over there? You know, storage?
Yeah. I had to delete some stuff.
So you can see our bilge manifold here. We have lazarette, aft engine room, forward engine room, and forward hold. Now to me, even at first, you could open up thinking I need to pump out the lazarette, you'd open up that valve and think you should be sucking on a lazarette. What you wouldn't know unless you knew the system was there's another valve back there in the after bulkhead that you have to open up. Our exhaust fans and things like that. Here are the controls for the blowers. When I was pushing that button up on deck, that's what actuates these 2 here. The fuel piping system, I could spend a whole nother 30 minutes talking about this, so I'll try to do it quick. We have 8 tanks on board. The 6 storage tanks we can suck from, the 8 tanks total we can fill. So I can take fuel out of one port and put it in any tank. I cannot take fuel out of the day tanks once it's in there. I can take fuel out of 2 port and put it in the day tanks. I can take fuel out of 3 port, put it to 4 port, doesn't matter. But I can't take fuel out of the day tanks. There's 2, the bottom pipeline, which runs along the bottom here, that's the suction side. Top pipeline is the fill side, that's what's going to fill the tanks. We have a meter, we can send fuel through the meter, or we can bypass the meter and go straight. We always use the meter. So when we're fueling on deck, that deck fitting basically is disconnected to the top of this pipe here. So they're going to start pouring fuel down that, and I'm going to open whatever valve I want. We can see the valves are numbered. They still have the old numbers on them, 4, 6, 8, but really it's 1 port, 2 port, 3 port. on Fourport. You guys will run into some confusion down there with that. For that, I apologize. I've been trying to change it because it's the worst system in the world. That's about all I'm going to go into down here. You guys have any questions?
Just what's that system, right? Just
Oh, these do our blowers, but now we have variable frequency drives on them, so this is just what controls them. So it's just like a little computer. And I can stop it from there, or I can stop it from there. These are electromagnetic, so as soon as you stop them, it actually disconnects. So if we lose power, this is will disconnect and need to be reset. The control panel for our generator here, you guys can see as we circle through. I'm not going to go into that. That's it's a little too much for. You'd have to start the generator, and we'd have to go through all that. But you want to know what that is? This is the control panel for the generator. You can see Jimmy's got notes on what all the readings should be. His readings are usually wrong anyway. Control for the fire pumps, one on either side. Fire pumps port and starboard. You can use either pump for whatever you want. It's a pretty flexible system. That's about it. So you can see there's a lot to this. Usually what I would do if I was going to bring somebody through it, I'd have some kind of narrative to follow. All right.